Get ready because it's clearly about to happen. We are finally about to get new info and possibly, in fact, very likely, our first look at gameplay, either in the form of a gameplay trailer or actually a first mission type walkthrough sort of video. Now, we got a lot to dig through, so if you can leave a like on this video, it helps a lot, but if you get to the end and it turns out you didn't actually like it, then feel free to turn your like into a dislike, but if you could drop a like right now, it helps a lot. Now, this all began when the voice actor for Venom, who is Tony Todd, actually retweeted a Spider-Man 2 GIF followed by a tweet which was basically saying, "Big creative news coming tomorrow." Now, the sad news was, well, when tomorrow came, it never was news for Spider-Man 2, but that does not mean it was not meant for the game, and instead things may have been held back. Now, you may think I sound very optimistic, and yes, I completely understand why, but the reason why I do is because of the following. Now, just over a week ago, we had news that the voice actor for Harry Osborn will no longer be voicing Harry in Spider-Man 2, simply because there were visual issues which, if I'm not mistaken, actually had something to do with age, which is questionable as, of course, CGI, etc., but okay. Now, that's one of the pieces of information that actually took quite a lot of people by surprise, because it just was one of those things where it's like, okay, that's a little bit random, I wouldn't really understand why that would happen, but I guess it's where we are. However, that piece of information did actually give us our first new scoop of information, which was actually the fact that the game would have a huge improvement with graphics given the photorealism. That's the first factor that I know has got a lot of people very, very excited. We already know what they were able to do with the first Spider-Man game, and we also equally know the limitations they would have faced with the last gen console. What we know is, of course, how much opportunity the PlayStation 5 gives these guys, which then, of course, leads to the whole Insomniac we trust, because we just know they're going to completely knock it out of the park. Now, this is where things get a little more interesting. Now, yesterday, the same voice actor tweets basically Miles Morales, but it was the wrong Miles Morales, but initially it was meant to be for the main voice actor, which basically said, "My man, rewatching you and Yuri brilliant performances with Insomniac Games on my souped up PlayStation 5 console, can't wait to join the party." Now, though there is nothing really, I guess, to unravel here, excluding the whole souped up PlayStation 5 part, it gets you wondering how far finished the game actually is, in the sense of, is voice acting completely finalized or not? This indicates quite a few things. Are we talking about watching a pre-early demo of the game, hence of course a tweet the other day followed by no news? It's possible. We know Yuri is returning as Peter Parker in the sequel, so hey. Now, the only reason I say that is because you could argue that, it's a previous game, but at the same time, just as I mentioned, Yuri is returning as Peter Parker, and the same voice actor for Miles Morales as well, so it does lead to, okay, you could be talking about the previous game, but then also the new installment of the game, which would make a lot more sense. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but as a fan, mapping this out makes total sense. Now, here's the thing. It's clear we are getting that momentum slowly rise up, where we basically have a complete drought where there's no information and no nothing, and then all of a sudden you get teasers that get dropped, causing everyone just to really stop and watch it unfold. Now, as far as we're concerned, this game is still coming out for 2023. Of course, we've been speculating the release date, and some have actually said it could actually be around the May-April mark, as they tend to release based on the season that's actually in the game, though that sounds genius. Sadly, it's just clearly not intentional. Now, it's clear that this game is not going to be coming out around that time frame, and is very much more likely to be coming out towards the end of next year. But that means things need to ramp up towards the end of January, and especially starting from February, as we need to see our first gameplay which we of course have not yet. Now if you compare this to the first Spider-Man game, though of course different circumstances in the sense of it was the first brand new Spider-Man game, if you will, on the current gen consoles at that time, but that first demo gameplay was dropped at E3 way in advance, and that's really what hyped up a lot of people. Now of course, however, we no longer have E3 anymore, and the game is already, well, very much well established, so they can technically just go ahead and drop it on their Twitter or YouTube, and every single person will still see it. It's not really, I mean, put it this way, we're not in that era now where E3 is kind of that main event to where people need that event to actually see the games, or where the games can actually have a platform. Games like Spider-Man, very well established already, it can just be dropped anywhere. I mean, look at the first trailer, right? It can be dropped at any time, on any platform, and it will go completely viral. Now, as I say, is it really speculation at this point to where you can say, okay, you know, you're overthinking things, etc, etc? It's debatable, but it's just a bit random how now we're approaching towards the end of the year, we're getting, you know, those wild sort of teasers that are releasing, and then it's just going, okay, well, where do we stand now? Now what's interesting is the initial tweet, of course, which as many of you guys will know by now, that was by the voice actor for Harry Osborn, actually got removed. Now, we don't know exactly the real reason as to why that was removed, but what we do know is it was removed. So that's where things do get a little bit interesting, because we know it clearly wasn't intentional as a means to, you know, get some eyeballs on Spider-Man 2 in general. It was literally just a voice actor saying, hey, I'm not going to be the voice actor and I'm a little bit confused, but I'm not really bummed out by it. And that's really as far as that tweet actually went. But with that being removed, I mean, it really comes down to, okay, are they really trying to silence people right now and keep everything hush-hush, or are we actually getting the complete opposite to where there may well be a delay? Now, I've heard this from quite a few people, and my brutally honest opinion on it is it's just not going to happen, simply because it's not a Spider-Man game that is being built from the ground up again. As far as the framework goes from the game, they've already got two versions. They got the first Spider-Man game, then they got Miles Morales. So as far as that stuff goes, it's not like they're having to start from scratch again. So in that sense, there can be sequels in a much shorter time period, etc. that would just make complete sense. Now, the second reason why it's not going to be delayed is because they also have the Wolverine game in progress as well. Now, the Wolverine game is said to be 2024. That's where things get interesting, because of course it comes down to, okay, are the brakes kind of on for that game where it's still being developed but nowhere near the pace that it needs to be because they're focusing on Spider-Man 2? Well, very likely, although as I say, the framework still is for, you know, there for the Spider-Man game. And by the way, you may be thinking like I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about as far as developing game goes, and I really don't. I've never developed a game in my entire life, nor do I actually intend to. So I'm just going off my absolute basic perception that if there's already been a game, there's a framework there, sure, it's still going to be incredibly difficult, but nowhere near as difficult had you had to do the assets from the ground up again. That's the point I'm trying to make. But then also I'm trying to say that with the Wolverine game still right around the corner after the Spider-Man game, I mean, look, there's deadlines to be met there. So there's investors, of course, in these projects. There's a lot of funding. So I guess these windows have to be met one way or the other. What do you think about this? Let me know your thoughts below. Of course, Marvel's Avengers got huge news yesterday, so you want to check that out right now on screen.